The City and the City by China Mieville was a fantastic book that I've just finished. I give it 5 out of 5 stars. It was everything that everyone promised me that it would be, and far more than I actually hoped or expected, because my expectations were nebulous. My experience with China Mieville started in the early 2000s, and I may be mispronouncing that name. If so, I'm sorry, but there you have it. I had come out of I'd had a few personal issues in life. I'd mostly been reading comfort books and fantasy. I was trying to re-emerge from the old classic fantasy into a bit more modern. I'd had China Mieville recommended. I went to the shop. I bought Perdido Street Station. I had a horrible reading experience. I DNF'd it. I loathed it so much that I let Reapy Cheap chew that book to pieces. In fact, I even encouraged him to chew that book to pieces, a thing I don't normally do. Loathed it. Over the next decade-ish, various people, when they hear the books I like and the books I've enjoyed, would say to me, "Oh, have you read China Mieville?" And I would say, "Hated it." And the look of bewilderment, surprise, polite confusion, the whole "I do not understand" of that statement over the years gave me reason to doubt my previous experience. And repeatedly people had told me that if I wanted to get into China Mieville, The City and the City was the way to go. So, having picked this beautiful edition from Dorset Bob's, I read it on the plane back to Australia and finished it the first few days I was back in Australia. Let's look at this cover. Oh, such tiny writing. The cover image is by David. I'm going to say that's probably Morrissey. Really love this cover. I know it's not the original, and the original covers would probably be worth more, but I think this is a fantastic image and wonderfully reflective of the book inside. So you've got our main protagonist, Inspector, what is his name? Borlu. Theodore Borlu, maybe? And he's standing in the center in between two cities. The two cities are contrasted by having hot and cold colors, which is great. The whole thing is reflected by a wet street, giving it that noir type vibe. And as I looked at it, I liked it. And then slowly a very subtle element crept out to me. So if you're seeing a reflection of yourself on the watery street, it will typically be out of focus. And if you see this side, then yes, it is out of focus. But this side is actually more in focus in the street than it is above ground. And the focus in the main protagonist is slashed by these lines, and the foci change from one to the other. So this is an incredibly subtle cover, and it completely reflects the subtlety within the book itself. So I think this particular image is perfect for the book, and I love it. Okay, so in the unlikely event that you don't know anything about The City and the City, or that you're considering reading it and haven't yet, I feel I'm very late to this party. 2009 is when it was published. It won thousands of awards in 2010, and I was a bit resentful of one of those until recently, because it beat The Wind-Up Girl by Bacigalupi, which I thought was a fantastic book as well. I think I can see why. Not sure where I stand on it. Okay, in The City and the City, we start with Inspector Theodore Borlu. He works for the extreme crime squad in the Besel, I don't know, city state. So let's say Besel is a city-state, and he has been called in to investigate a dead girl. She is a Jane Doe, and just a small example of the subtlety that you find throughout this book is that in this imaginary city of Besel, a Jane Doe is known as a Fulana something. Can't remember the second word. But from then on, she's referred to as Fulana until some identity is established. And I thought just getting that extra word instead of just a Jane Doe gave more depth and more layers to the story and the city and the whole culture. This layering is throughout, and I found it quite exceptional. So Inspector Borlu is investigating this, and they don't know who she is. They're trying to find out. Now, this book is billed as a police procedural. China Mieville himself said that he wants to write a book of every type of genre, and this was his police procedural. So it starts off like that. And I like police procedurals. I like crime fiction books. Don't mind crime non-fiction books. So we're going through that and I'm enjoying it, but these tiny plinks of weirdness keep getting thrown at you. So that very subtly and organically you realize you're in a realistic type world, but you're not in the real world. You're not even in a mainstream fiction world, which is not a real place, but is essentially the real world. Tiny things. Like Inspector Borloo is walking down the street and he sees a woman walking down the other street and he looks at her and then he realizes she's not really there. And it's like, well, you just saw her. So she is really there and she's just looked back at you. So you're both really there. What's happening here? That's one of those subtle introductions that will ease you into the weirdness if you haven't read much about this book beforehand. Now, I had read a bit about this book beforehand. I had heard about it beforehand, but not recently. So I essentially went into this novel cold, not knowing what was waiting for me, except that it would be weird. And it was wonderfully weird. And not knowing really, I think, facilitated the experience. So if you haven't read this book and you're thinking of it, and at six or 7 minutes in, you decide, hey, I'd better read this before I watch the rest of the review, I encourage you to do that. The algorithm won't like it, but you know, I think it's a great way to read it. Read it cold. You won't know what's happening. It will become slowly revealed in a very, very skillful way. The writing is exceptional. Okay, so we've got the city of Basel, and we find out that it's the twin city to Alcoma, Ulcoama, UL space QOMA, whatever you want to make of it. So these two cities exist side by side, and the skillful writing which steadily builds the story through following this police procedure means that you don't instantly know what these two cities are to each other, so spoilers from here on. Now, my first thoughts were that they existed side by side in two different dimensions. You know, two dimensions that are just a whisper apart and can occasionally be crossed, but can't constantly be crossed. That's a bit of a mainstay of mythology, fairy tales, and fantasy. And it seemed to me that that was what was happening here. And I was there for it. But it turns out it's something way weirder. In fact, the city we start in, the Basel, whatever, Borloo's city, has got this very Eastern Bloc feeling. It's clearly Eastern European inspired, both in its name and its culture and its behavior. It's a bit down at heel. It's not a prosperous city-state. And even though throughout this book we get mentions that are clearly of modern technology, we've got internet, we've got mobile phones, we've got iPads and AirPods and all the tech, it's not intrusive and it's not a main part of your story. It's there as a background to show you that this city, this state, this story is happening in a contemporary city. However, Basel feels very much sort of down in heel in a sort of depressed 70s sort of way. Now, exactly where this city is subtly not given. We know it's on the bank of a river, not too far in from the sea, because that's part of the description of it. It's definitely Eastern Bloc, but it's not a specific spot, and I think it borrows from lots of Eastern Bloc countries. The names reflect that as well. It's very set in a different locale. Now, if I lived in the Eastern Bloc or knew much about it, I might have opinions about that, but as a Westerner, that's where it felt, and I love that feeling. I love that feeling of reading a book set in a different part of the world that isn't really part of this world at all. Now, that's Basel. Its neighbouring city, Alcoma, however, sounds much more like Byzantium, prosperous Byzantium. It seems to me to have a more Eastern feel. It's got different colours, it's got different buildings, it's got different language, and the two cities are quite different, and never the twain shall meet, except at one border crossing, which is called Copula Hall, and exists between the two cities. Fascinating premise. Except that China Mieville is messing with your head. The two cities aren't two cities, they are one city. This is the city of one locale, one geographical setting, and they share the same area. And what you've got is you've got the citizens conditioned from birth to only see one of these two of these cities. And visitors from outside have to be coached before they can get a visa to come to these cities, and one of the things they're coached on is how to only see the one city they're in. You can't acknowledge anything that's on the other city, even though it is physically the same. So if this was Bezek, and I can't reach that, this was Elcoma, you could, and I was in Elcoma, I couldn't reach out and touch this because I'd been conditioned from birth to not acknowledge it was there, not see it. So there's this wonderful term that's used throughout, is unsee. It's like if you accidentally turn and you see the other city, you do this mental flip where you suddenly can't see what's there. And they don't just have the unseeing, they've got the unsensing. If a smell comes across, you don't smell it if you know it's from the other city. If it's spicy and rich, it's probably Elcoma. We don't hear too much about the other side. So sights, sounds, smells, anything from the other city, you have been conditioned from birth to not see, not experience. They just don't exist. So Mieville coins a term for the fact that both of these cities and all of these people are together in one space. They've termed gross topically. So the gross topical, I don't know. The physical is both of them, are all of them together, standing side by side. They are the same thing. And within this city, you've got these three zones that they describe, which I wrote down so that I wouldn't get them wrong. Where I wrote them down is a totally different question. Here we go. So this city contains these three types of zones. Or does it? Maybe not. Or do they? Maybe not. But the one that they're talked about and that the citizens know is total. That means it's entirely in your city. This whole room is in one city. Altar is entirely their city. So my hallway is altar. It's in the other world. I am locked in this room. There is no way out because I can't move from this room to the other space. That's the altar. And then you've got cross-hatching. That means that the space has got some of both. So that bookshelf is in one city, that bookshelf is another. I can't pick up a book from that shelf and put it on the other. So there's true sections. Now, as a reader, this has been slowly revealed to you. I think it probably only becomes entirely clear to you about a quarter to a third of the way in, because you're actually following the police procedural of uncovering this dead girl. And the city, the background for the whole thing, the bits of information are thrown at you only as relevant to this investigation. So it's very subtly done. I loved it. Now, around about the time that your average reader is starting to think this is absolutely batshit crazy, why on earth would the people who live in this city or these cities go along with this? That's when we learn about breach. Breach is something that comes in to the story from the beginning, because the people who live there know about breach in the same way that we know about water, or tea as it happens. You can't take a book from that bookshelf and put it on that because that's a breach. And a breach you can't breach. Breach is bad. But then we start to learn more about the breach. And the breach is a significant concept, and once again, Mieville messes with your head with this. First of all, you think it's imaginary. then you think it's policing, then you think it's supernatural. You can't quite understand what this breach is, only that it's bad. People who are found in breach are taken out of their system. They're not subject to the laws because the breach overrules any laws. The militia or the polizia in the two different cities, they overrule everything. If a citizen is found in breach, normally they vanish. And we're talking about something as small as glancing over and seeing the book on the other shelf, even though that shelf isn't in your city. That is a breach. And you never know when breach are watching. No, we're not eating books. We're not eating books from either shelf. I love birds. Well, I love this bird. He loves books. Perhaps I shouldn't have encouraged him to chew the occasional book that I loathed. Maybe that was a bad notion. You reckon? Yes. Okay, so you never know when breach is watching, but they seem to be watching a lot. How are they watching? It seems supernatural. If you in your own house breach by looking out of the window and seeing another house, how on earth could they know that? It's got to be supernatural, right? Or maybe it's incredibly high tech. But tech doesn't seem to be the point of this book. So maybe not high tech. And I'm not going to lie, for a large part of the book, Mieville fooled me into thinking that maybe breach wasn't real. Maybe it was a total imaginary experience that the citizens told each other to keep themselves in the right lane. That's not exceptional in human experience, but it turns out that all of a sudden breach people or experiences start happening. They happen off camera. They sort of slowly creep up until they become a major part of the story. Now, we've moved fully into the city and away from the actual crime that is the superficial story that's being told here. Inspector Borlu is investigating this. He decides that this girl has probably been brought from the other city, from Alcoma, and dumped. That would make it breach. So he tries to shuffle this investigation off onto breach, because breach can go anywhere and question everyone, and he wants justice for the dead woman. By now they've got an idea who she might be. She was tied with a whole heap of seditious organizations. Some people are calling for unification of the two cities, shock horror, and there's a few other malcontents. She's been tied to them. Though it seems to be that she was mainly there to research. It turns out that she wasn't a citizen of these two cities. She's a Canadian who was there on a student visa, not in Borlu's city of Bessel, but in the other Alcoma, where they're doing a lot of archaeological investigations into the history relevant to that city. She was investigating a concept that everyone claims is a fairy tale of another city within those two cities. So by now we've got two cities that are in the same space gross-topically, but where you can't see each other. But do you? Because by now we've got 4 cities. We've got Alcoma, we've got Bezek, we've got Breach. What the hell are they? We still don't really know. And we've got this other Orsini, I think it's called. That was what this dead woman was investigating, even though everyone insists that it isn't real, it's just a fairy tale. Even the person who first wrote the book about it initially eventually says, no, it's not real, it's just a fairy tale. And we find that out because Borlu is given a visa to cross over into the other city of Alcoma and assist or advise their police on how to keep following up this investigation. But at this point, it isn't a breach. She was killed. She was killed in Alcoma, but she was brought into Bessel legally. So there's a lot to investigate if we're going to find out who murdered her and why, but none of it seems to be breached, so it can't be shuffled off. Now, following Borlu as he goes into Alcoma is fascinating. This is a more prosperous city. It's more vibrant. It's got spices. It's got more life. It's got more money. It's got more colour. And he has to wander around these streets and pretend that he can't see the city just on the other side of the street that he's lived in his whole life. It is mind-blowing. But the really subtle thing about this book is, however mind-blowing it is, it's told in such a matter-of-fact, not dry, but matter-of-fact fashion that it just seems real and ordinary. And you as a reader, you know this isn't a normal way of seeing the world. So you've got this subtle importance throughout of society and its subconscious beliefs, and how this weirdness of humanity is relevant to this book. It's like anyone who's traveled overseas has reached another country where there's things that you do and you don't do, and they just believe that is completely unlike anything you have believed. And you have that moment of enemy where you try to deal with it. In these two cities, or in the book, The City and the City, I think Mieville really gets a person to look into humanity and the things that we believe and why exactly do we believe them. So these two cities, you've got an international phone and internet address between the two of them, or do you? And they speak different languages, or do they? Now, if you look on the internet and everything, and inside the book, you're told that yes, they do speak two different languages. You've got, let's see, Bessel speaks a language that is Greek derived or Cyrillic derived, or maybe something of both. Now, Elcoma speaks something that is called Illitan, and is apparently written in Latin, or Latinic alphabet at least. And for a while you accept that. There's a lot about accents, because someone who's coming to Bessel from Elcoma, they're speaking Bessel, too many Z's. They're speaking that with a really good or really bad accent, or it's clear that they're from the accent that they're alien. But there's these hints here and there in the book that essentially, if you weren't doing this unseeing, unsensing thing, you'd be able to understand them both perfectly well and exactly the same. So are they two languages or are they not? Any language can be written in the Latin alphabet. It's going to be a bit weird, but you can do it. So the fact that you've got one that's Cyrillic and one that's Latin doesn't really tell you anything. And I haven't seen anyone else talking about that, but I thought that was interesting. Okay, we're over there. He's investigating. The investigation becomes weirder and weirder. It's tied in with her studies. It's tied in with the university. We meet other university people. Another girl disappears because she's terrified. And we find that eventually she's hiding because she's terrified the same thing that happened to this girl would happen to her. It's a complex, complicated plot, which I enjoyed. But the real star of this book is The City and the City and humanity in general. You learn more about the breach. It creeps in there more and more. But essentially, I think the thing that fascinated me all the way through this is humanity. How can you believe things that are utterly unbelievable? Well, we do it all the time. And this book really highlights how you can be trained from birth to believe things that against the evidence of your eyes and your experience. So by the end, things get seriously weird, and I'm certainly not going to talk too much about that. I loved the layering of this book. I love the fact that we're searching for the root of a murder, maybe the murderer, or maybe just what happened. And I love that. I love moving between the two cities. I love the fact that you had all these weird experiences, the cross-hatching and so forth, and that all of this was given to you in a very organic and very complex way. So how do you build this whole image of these cities that make no sense? You've got small things like you'll hear the myth of the boy and the girl that met in Coppola Hall. What's it called? I wrote this down. Coppola Hall. They meet in Coppola Hall and they recognize each other and they have a brief romance. Then they both have to go back to their own cities. And they are actually living in houses right next to each other, but they live out their life never seeing each other ever again because they're in different cities. So that's a myth that falls in there to help create this three-dimensional world, multi-dimensional experience. And that writing was fantastic. I'm glad that I've read this book. It's open up more Mieville books to me. I hope. Not sure I'm ever going back to Perdita Street Station. Not sure I'm going that far, but I'm definitely reading more by this author. What else have I wanted to say about this? There's a lot more. Right at the end, when Inspector Borlu has kind of uncovered what's happening, Breach is seriously involved, and that is fantastic as well. We find a period, and I don't want to say too much about it, but you've got someone who's escaping through the interstitial areas. He's walking down a street, and he is able to create his mannerisms, his behavior in such a way that either city looking at him doesn't know which city he belongs to. So if you don't know which city it belongs to, you just automatically unsee it. And essentially you've got someone who is invisible because they know how to mess with people's brains so that they won't be seen. And I think that along with the two cities and the perception, the human perception here, is such a fascinating take on humanity and our behaviors. So that was great. What else about this book? Okay, this thing won more awards than you could believe. We've got Locus Awards for Best Fantasy. We've got Arthur C. Clarke. We've got World Fantasy Awards, BSFA Awards. Kitschies, I've never heard of the Kitschies before, but apparently it won a Red Tentacle. And a Hugo Award for Best Novel in 2010. I believe the 2010 is the one where it won over the Wind-Up Girl. A hard decision between the two of them, to be honest. And I loved the Wind-Up Girl. It was nominated for Nebula and a John W. Campbell Memorial Award. So I think that in terms of density, I didn't find it hard book to read. I've seen that a couple of people did. I think that the only real way to sit down and read this book is to clear some time in your day. You're not going to be able to pick this up for 10 minutes and get into it. You're going to need to give yourself a good couple of hours. You're going to have to be fully immersed in it and have individuals, the city, which you start in, which is special, vessel, and the situation in your head with those tiny little clings intriguing you to find out more. This was a fantastic book. I absolutely loved it. I will reread it. I am delighted to own it. And yeah, I'm going to have to be careful what I read next, to be honest. Anything after this might seem a little bit flat. So, thank you very much for watching this review of a fantastic book, The City and the City. More reviews will be coming as I work through the pile of new books I've got and read good books.